Nobody warns you how lonely adulthood feels. When you're younger, loneliness feels easier to understand. It's more transparent, in my opinion. You know when you feel left out, you know when you don't belong, and you know when something feels wrong socially, in school, especially in school. But in adulthood, loneliness feels more different. I think it feels much more complex because it's more quieter. It's become more, it's like less visible and it's harder to explain in general. And from the outside, your life can look completely normal. You can still be talking to people, still go through your daily routine, still doing everything you're supposed to do, and it still feels like something important is missing underneath all of it. And I don't think it's being talked enough around people, and especially yourselves. And I think part of what makes adult loneliness so weird is that it doesn't always look like loneliness. You can have friends, you can get to know people, and you can be around people pretty often, be more active socially, but yet you still feel emotionally disconnected. And that's what makes it confusing because it's hard to point out one obvious reason and say, oh, that's why I feel this way. Sometimes nothing dramatic happens, nobody betrays you, nobody disappears or ghosts you overnight. Life just keeps on moving, and somewhere along the line, connection started feeling thinner and thinner than it used to. And I think a lot of people experience that without really knowing what to do and how to talk about it or even where to start. They just know that something feels off and they're present in their own life but not fully connected to it. I think growing up is really the silent killer. As you know, like the older you get, the more relationship starts changing in quieter ways than you notice. Change is not always through conflict and it's not always through some big dramatic ending like through a fight or whatever. I think sometimes people just get pulled in different directions. Let's say you and the people around us all get into various responsibilities, be it you get a new job or your friend gets a new partner, and that's when the priority shifts and more responsibilities equates to being much more tired, much more occupied, and being tired and occupied forces you, of course, to move and make a change and adapt. And I think that adaptiveness comes with a price, and the price sometimes being friendships that were once treasured. And suddenly, the people who used to feel close start feeling a little bit harder to reach. And slowly, bit by bit, I think that really adds up. And it's not really because anyone is a bad person. And it's definitely not because anyone meant to let the connection fade on purpose. It's how the way adulthood has of filling people's lives until emotional closure and closeness starts becoming something you assume is still there, but then when you realize it, it hasn't really been maintained and it's too late. And I think that kind of distance hurts in a way people underestimate because there's no clean ending to the process. It's just blank. And it's a quiet realization that something doesn't feel the same anymore. I think one of the hardest parts about this is realizing that being surrounded by people is not the same feeling as being connected to them. You can still laugh with people, you can still text people, and you can still go out and do normal things. But at the end of the day, you will still feel alone in a way that's hard to explain. Because sometimes loneliness isn't about physical isolation. Sometimes it's just a feeling like nobody really sees the version of you that's carrying everything internally. It's having thoughts you don't know how to say out loud anymore. And it's getting so used to keeping things to yourself that eventually it starts to feel normal. And I think that's the part that really gets to people, especially me as well. And it's not always the loneliness itself, but how easy and sort of scary it is to slowly adapt to it. How easy it is to start living in a disconnected way and call it, just being busy or, just adulthood. For me, personally, I don't really think I notice it at all, like, especially not at once. It wasn't like some huge dramatic moment where everything suddenly, like, click. To me, it was smaller than that. It was noticing that I had a lot in my mind, but not really knowing who I wanted to talk to about it. And thus, I just started internally, like, monologuing all my thoughts and actions. Sometimes I wish I said certain things to some people, and sometimes I wish I'd done something that I should have done, or, regret something that I've done in the past. And I think when I talk to people, I don't really express that about myself to them. And that's where I still feel that distance that I have, especially even if it's with my closest friends. And it's one of those like random quiet moments, where you check your phone, not because, you're expecting anything important or whatsoever, but because part of you and part of me just wants to feel remembered. And I think that's when it starts to hit. It's not when your life falls apart, and it's not when you're completely alone, but when you realize connection has been fading in small ways for a while, and you've been acting like it doesn't affect you. That kind of loneliness is hard to catch because it doesn't crash into your life. It just slowly settles into it, and by the time anyone notices, and you yourself notices, it's sort of too late. And I've been wondering to myself, like, why isn't the topic of adult loneliness being talked about as much, with anyone or everyone? And I think one of the reasons people don't really talk about adult loneliness enough is because it feels weirdly and socially embarrassing. Like, once you're an adult, you're morally obligated or like socially expected to really have like your people, being able to sort of have a baseline friendship with the people you're supposed to, and you're supposed to have your own routine, your cycle, your own life more or less figured out. And if you admit that you can feel lonely, it can sometimes feel, you've admitted that you failed at something, like you're playing the game of life wrong somehow. And I think sometimes, personally, I wouldn't let my ego really slide that much. But honestly, I think a lot more people are carrying this than they let on. And I think a lot of people are functioning perfectly fine on the outside while still feeling quietly disconnected on the inside. They're working, they're replying to your texts, they're posting about stuff on social media, and overall they're just, joking around and just being actively social. But I think they do pretend to look okay. And internally, they feel the distance from people, from themselves, or from the kind of connections they thought adulthood would come with. And because everyone hides it, everyone ends up thinking they're the only one. But you have to know, you're not alone. Every day I reflect on what I've done for the day and what could have been better, all for the sake of the deeper truth in living my own life. Here's what I notice. Maybe the real things nobody warns you about isn't just that adulthood gets lonely. Maybe it's that loneliness becomes invisible. It doesn't always come from being unwanted. Sometimes it comes from growing, from growing up, from drifting, from changing, from outgrowing certain relationships, from carrying certain things that you haven't fully learned how to express. And if you've been feeling that lately, I don't think it means there's something wrong with you. I don't think it means you're broken. I don't think it means you're failing. And I definitely don't think it means you're the only one. I think it means you're dealing with something a lot of people go through quietly. And maybe part of growing up is realizing that connection doesn't always stay automatic. Sometimes you have to rebuild it, you have to reach for it again, and sometimes you just have to be honest with yourself and what you have missed. And I think even admitting that is more powerful than people realize, and it's an important step in order for self-improvement. If you've been feeling this way too, please just, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your life stories, and I'm actually curious about how many people have been dealing with this quietly, because I honestly think this is way more common than people think, and dealing with it quietly on your own, I wouldn't think is the best solution. So you can make it a start by reaching out in the comments, and I'll read every single one, I promise. So yes, I've come to the video. If you want more videos like this, real conversations about stuff people actually feel but don't always say out loud, please stick around, and I'll be posting more of this in the channel in the future. Thank you.